Welcome to the MOOC series of lectures on political science. Today, we will discuss the evolution of the state system. The evolution of the state system from primitive tribal state to Oriental Empire, then from Oriental Empire to the Greek city-state, then up to the Roman Empire, that is the world empire. Now the state, as we discuss in different times, it attracts the attention of so many political scientists because we live within the state and our life is regulated by the state either fully or partially. Naturally, all the political scientists, they discuss different aspects of the state, its development, its origin, and its nature. Now, regarding the origin of the state and evolution of the state, so many theories are there, but most of the political scientists, they agree with one point, that the state is neither the creation of an individual or it is created in a single day or in a single year or within a few years. It is the product of a long evolution and so many factors contributed to the development of the state system. Some of the factors are kinship, religion, property, war, technological development, and political consciousness. And all these factors, they contributed to different extent to the development of the state. But one thing from which we should start is that the role of the family in the process of the development of the state. Human beings live within the family and their life starts from the family. Within this family, we can understand the nature of our group life, which takes us to the social life. Naturally, family is the most important thing which should be discussed when we discuss the origin of the state. And this family, it brings the individual from the life of savagery to the life of a civilized one. So, family and the role of the family should be discussed properly in discussing the nature of the state. From the family, we understand the obligation, we understand the authority, we understand the nature of civilized life, which takes us to a new phase of the development. Naturally, to discuss the evolution of the state, we must start with the family. The states in different parts of the world have their own histories. Their process of development is different from each other. But the social scientists, they have drawn some general conclusions from the history of the development of the state. That is, most of the states have passed several phases. What we find in the modern state, modern nation state, has developed through several stages, and most of the stages are primitive tribal state, the Oriental Empire, the Greek city-state, the Roman Empire, up to the feudal state. And after feudal state, the modern nation state has emerged. What we find in the modern nation state has started its journey from the primitive tribal state. So the primitive tribal state is the starting point. It may be considered as the starting point of the evolution of modern nation state. the primitive tribal state. The earliest form of tribal organization of authority, command, and obedience is described as the tribal state. Now, these tribal states were primitive in nature. According to Professor R.G. Gettel, the tribal states were comparatively small in size and were governed by chiefs. Sometimes the chiefs were assisted by advisory councils. Some were nomadic, others were permanently settled in definite areas. While the main purpose of their existence was the preservation of internal order and the waging of aggressive or defensive war, they often retained strong traces of common birth, common religion, and common economic interests. The scope of their political power was narrow, most of the affairs of life being controlled by long established customs. So the tribal states, the primitive tribal states, the earliest form of the state system, here we find the blood relationship among the members of the society. They are connected with the blood relationship. The modern idea of authority was non-existent, but some form of authority was definitely there. The society was ruled by the customs, and the people of the group, the members of the group, they were associated with each other by blood relationship. So the earliest form of state, that is the primitive tribal state, it gives birth to the one type of authority, the authority which we find now as a modern form of authority, but this type of authority is found in the primitive tribal states. The aborigines of Australia and in some other parts of the world, we find the examples of these tribal states. However, the nomenclature tribal state is to some extent controversial, because according to many authors, some of the tribal states are just like that. They possessed the characteristic of authority, but they didn't possess other characteristics of a state. Naturally, they cannot be called state in any sense of the term. However, be it state or pre-state, they possess some qualities of the state, and ultimately these states developed into a new type or new pattern of the state. When tribal states were transformed into empires, the new qualities of the state were added into it. The Oriental Empire. In course of time, population increased and new techniques of production were evolved, and as we all know, new sources of natural bounty were discovered. Naturally, the human civilization entered into a new phase. The nomadic people began to settle in different parts of the world, and some areas, some geographical areas where there are fertile soil, good climate, which helped the people to settle and to produce for themselves, and production took place in abundance. These areas ultimately became the habitat of a large number of people. The valley of Nile, the valley of Euphrates, the valley of Ganges, the Yellow River, the Yangtze, all these valleys, all these valleys, they attracted large number of people, and the population began to increase. Now, according to Gettel, in the fertile valleys of Nile, the Euphrates, the Ganges, the Yellow River, and Yangtze, which are called the cradles of civilization, wealth accumulated and cities arose. Such areas, furnishing abundant food with little effort, attracted surrounding peoples and led to that conflict and intermingling which was so important in creating the state as contrasted with the earlier kinship organizations. So the new state was different from the primitive tribal state. These states which started to develop from the rivers of Nile, Ganges, Euphrates, etc., they attracted a large number of people, and the people with their effort, large-scale production were possible. Ultimately, a new type of civilization that emerged in these areas. From this point, a new type of empire, the Oriental Empire, started to take its form. The increased prosperity led to the development of the art of war and conquest of territories. I again quote Professor R.G. Gettel. Through loose alliances or through the conquest of the weaker by the stronger and more aggressive, the inhabitants of these valleys were bound together into the empires of Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, India, and China. These empires were not strongly centralized, but were made of subordinate units, practically autonomous of local affairs, yet under central supervision, obliged to furnish soldiers and to pay tributes. Thus, the early advance of civilization was marked by oppression and exploitation. Now, this type of empires, they were large in size, but this large size gave a new weakness to these empires, because these large empires were difficult to control. The centralized control was almost impossible. So some local authorities developed and these empires were weakened. However, these Oriental empires, they are very, very important in the development of the state system. In these empires, some people, they were the oppressors and some were oppressed, because the king, with the assistance of the priest class, they form the ruling class. And the other people, they became almost the slaves. Naturally, the relationship between slave owner and slaves started taking place in these type of systems. Some people, they began to control the property and the labor of the slaves. This type of system developed in the Oriental empires, where some were oppressed and some were oppressors. And ultimately, these large empires, the size were eroded due to the lack of central control, and ultimately we find the erosion of these empires and the downfall of this type of state system. However, these empires, they give a valuable service to human civilization, because from the primitive tribal state system, we find some modern elements of state in these Oriental empires. There is authority, there was definitely subjugation, but there was law, some form of law, legal system, and some form of political authority, because there are often revolts against the authority. To suppress the revolt, one type of army that was created, all these institutions, they were created during these empires. So these empires, they were progressive in nature. They are more progressive from the primitive tribal state, and journey of the modern state started from these Oriental empires. Now, after the erosion of the Oriental Empire, we find a new development in the state system, and it is the Greek city-states. The Oriental empires were essentially agricultural land powers. But in Greek city-states, we find a new type of civilization. Now, the civilization which developed around Aegean and Mediterranean are new types of civilization where a new European land gave rise to a new civilization, the Greek city-state. Again, I quote Professor R.G. Gettel. As civilization spread to the region around the Aegean and the Mediterranean, new geographical forms gave rise to new forms of social organization. Europe is a peninsula where land is broken by the sea into small units, permitting communication, but making invasion from Asia difficult to some extent in those days. The peculiar location of Greece helped in the evolution of a new form of political organization in ancient days. So, a new political organization developed in Greece because the geographical area of Greece was totally different. Greece was a small area, but in this small area, few systems emerged. A new type of state were developed in Greece, and these are called city-states or polis. Again, I quote from Gettel, the mountains and the sea break up this area into numerous valleys and islands, easily defended, yet because of the sea, not isolated. In contrast to the uniformity of Asia, the variety of moderation of nature in Greece developed a different mental attitude and genius. Here, small communities were settled in secluded valleys, guarded by mountains and the sea, but they were in constant contact with outside world through their harbors. They evolved their political organization into city-states. The city-states were different from the Oriental empires because the people in different city-states, they were secluded from each other. But there was constant contact between or among themselves. Not only that, most of these city-states developed relation with outside world, with the states which situated outside Greece. Naturally, the Greek city-states, they emerged as a new form of state, a new form of political organization which we did not find in previous state systems like the primitive tribal state or Oriental empires. In Greek city-states, we find different types of political systems. We find the primitive form of democracy in Greek city-states. Yes, in Oriental empires also, in some areas, particularly in India, democracy was practiced. But in Greek city-states, democracy was practiced widely and some democratic institutions developed. I quote from Gettel, the small size of the state provided for closer relations between the government and the citizens. Earlier forms of democracy therefore evolved in some of the city-states. The most important example is Athens. But the population of the Greek city-states were divided also into free men and slaves. Most prominent city-states were Athens, Sparta, Argos, Attica, etc. Sparta is known for its perfect discipline, while Athens presented an ideal platform for direct democracy. So, in Greek city-states, we find a new type of political system and also a creation of new political institutions. In Greek city-states, some of the Greek city-states, democracy was practiced. For example, in Athens, the Athenian democracy, it gives an ideal democratic system that is the direct form of democracy. In other Greek city-states also, democracy was practiced. But in a city-state like Sparta, authoritarianism was there. But in most of the Greek city-states, either democracy or some form of aristocracy was practiced. Now, Sparta, Athens, etc., all these Greek city-states, they present a new model of state system, that is the Greek city-state, where political systems developed to a large extent, where political institutions developed, and where we find political ideas. Plato and Aristotle, Socrates, they wrote a large number of books and some new political theories we find from them. Some of the theories are still relevant. So, an interesting phase in the development of the state system is the Greek city-state. However, the Greek city-states did not last long due to internal feud, due to constant conflict between or among the city-states. The Greek city-state system was disintegrated. I can give you one example. There was a 30-year war between the Athens and Sparta. The name of this war is called Peloponnesian War. And due to this war, both these two developed city-states suffered to a large extent, particularly Athens. So, constant conflict between or among the city-states that had its impact on the strength of the city-states, and ultimately we find the downfall of the Greek city-states when Alexander the Great from Macedon, he extended his empire, he captured a large part of Greece and also a large part of Europe and Asia, and ultimately we find the disintegration of the city-states of Greece. Now, after the downfall of the Greek city-states, we find Roman Empire, the world empire. After the destruction or downfall of the Greek city-states, there emerged the Roman Empire, which captured a large part of Europe and Asia, and the political development passed eastward to Rome. Now, Roman Empire is also an important development in the history of state system, because the Romans, they developed a strong nation, not nation in the modern sense of the term, but the Romans, they were the groups which united all the tribals and they formed a nation in some sense or other, not in the modern sense of nation, but definitely the Romans developed themselves as a race, which can be called a race. You can call it a nation, but I can call it a race. How the Romans developed themselves? Because the Romans, they knew that the conflict between the groups should be minimized, and that is possible if any type of legal system may be developed. The Romans, they developed a legal system, the system which gave birth to law in the modern sense of the term. Nowadays we talk about law. Law should be codified. But before the Roman Empire, laws were not codified. The Romans, they codified the law because it was their compulsion. They captured large part of Europe and Asia, and there was a conflict about the status of the newly captured areas, whether they can be called citizens or subjects. And all these conflicts were settled through the Roman idea of law and the Roman idea of citizenship. The question is how the Romans, they were developed as a strong race, a strong group, or a strong nation, whatever be the nature of that group. I can quote Professor R.G. Gettel again. The various settlements on the neighboring hills were soon united with Rome by conquest or by federation. That means the Romans, they united everyone by conquest or by treaty or some type of persuasion. Now, Gettel also says that in Rome, the rigid fetters of custom were broken. The necessary compromise and treaty resulting from the relations of various tribes began the growth of Rome's wonderful system of law. Then the process of conquest began, which led to the creation of empire. So the Romans, they first united themselves. And after that, the Romans, they created a new system by which all the people were united. A system of law was created. Citizenship was given to the people who were either conquered or united with Rome through persuasion. And by this way, the Romans, they created a powerful race or powerful nation. And this race or nation, they ultimately began to spread their area. And the result was the expansion of Roman Empire. The Roman Empire expanded. The Romans expanded their territory from Rome to a large part of Europe almost. A large part of Europe was under Roman Empire, and they extended then their empire to Asia, and a large part of Asia was also included within the Roman Empire. So, after Greek city-state, we find a new type of imperial state, the Roman Empire, which is really a new form of state system in the evolution of the state. The Roman Empire evolved a well-knit political organization. I quote from Gettel again. Monarchy was replaced by aristocracy. The population was still divided into patricians and plebeians, yet the plebeians enjoyed greater privilege than the Greek slaves. Internal dissensions were largely avoided by extending citizenship. Assemblies were widened. However, the power of aristocrats increased with the expansion of empire. Religious sanctions were added to the authority of the empire, which led to the concentration and centralization of authority. The result was the suppression of individual freedom. Ultimately, the institution of democracy and local self-government disappeared. The strong empire eventually disintegrated under its own weight. However, the Romans, they created some new systems. They developed themselves as a strong race. They expanded their area into large part of Europe and Asia. Monarchy was replaced by aristocracy. System of law was evolved. System of citizenship, the idea of citizenship was developed also. So all these things gave a unique characteristic to the Roman Empire. But it is also true that there were class divisions within Roman Empire. There are patrician and plebeians. Patricians are the ruling classes and the plebeians are the downtrodden. But these plebeians, they have more power and freedom than the slaves. But ultimately, this Roman Empire did not last long because there are internal dissensions. As the empire was large, local chieftains, they began to revolt, and ultimately Roman Empire was disintegrated. And in Roman Empire, violation of the rights of the citizens took place in abundance, and ultimately the Roman Empire was disintegrated. However, the Roman Empire is really a wonderful feature in the development of the state system, because some of the modern features of state, like the system of law, the system of citizenship, and the idea of unity, all are evolved during the Roman Empire. The state is developing, and as we all know that the state developed also after the destruction of the Roman Empire. After the destruction of the Roman Empire, we find the emergence of the feudal system, the feudal state system. And this feudal state system, they gave birth to a new type of state. And this will be discussed in our next lecture. Thank you.